Hi everyone, this is our cross-stage Think Big for the ops section. Nadia's not here today. She had a conflict, so I'm going to be kicking us off today. We have a really exciting conversation, but before we dive into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about a change in the way that we're going to structure the meeting. We're trying to figure out a way to make this more collaborative and allow for ideas to kind of come together a little more smoothly. So today what we're going to do is two different things. We are going to utilize a mural board. For those of you who haven't used it, it's kind of like a digital whiteboard or mural wall that we can all interact on. There's a link in the agenda, as well as I've added a link in the chat for everyone to jump in on. The other thing we're going to try a little bit differently, and I think we've done this before, where we're going to split the session into two different pieces. The first half of our session will really focus on thinking big, divergent thinking, what are different ways we can solve or interpret the problem. And then the second half will be on think small, which is much more in line with the GitLab idea of what's the smallest changes we could make in the next milestone to start working towards these big ideas that we've been talking about. Any questions before we dive in? Should be pretty straightforward. Okay, Ori, take it away.
Thank you. So I'm not like a pro in murals, so just like if I need help, be around. So let's start with talking a little about the issue, and then I'm kind of in a dilemma whether to walk through the issue or walk through the mural board because they're kind of a reflection. But let's start with the general idea. So the idea is that we want to create feature flags as an issue type, and why do we want to do that? Because as a feature flag user, I want to be able to create a feature flag and link MRs, issues, and so on, and easily sort and filter, have discussions around the flag. So this all originated from the fact that I did some competitor analysis with LaunchDarkly, and I found a bunch of missing functionality. And when I started to open up all the missing issues that we have to implement, I'm going to give two for example. I was like, this sounds like an issue. So one of them was the fact that they wanted, in LaunchDarkly, you can assign feature flags to someone. You can have ownership of a flag. And why is that needed? Because let's say I'm an SRE in charge of production, but I'm not the person who actually created the flag. I need to know like who I need to contact if something goes wrong. And so you can assign someone to the flag. So there you have an assignee. And another thing that they had was the ability to add tags to flags so that you can easily filter and sort them and find them. So let's say you can filter all the flags that you have on production, or all the flags that are associated to specific user management or something, whatever. You can do whatever you want. Which really, when I started opening this up, sounded like labels. And I was like, hey, wait a minute. Everything that I'm opening up right now sounds like an issue. And it sounds like maybe feature flags needs to be an issue. Maybe we don't need to copy everything off of the issue type, but it sounds like we can reuse a lot of stuff. And there was a precedent that Sarah from Monitor created an incident type where she kind of picked and chose what she wanted to use from the issue into the incident. And that's kind of where this idea came from. And I know that Jackie has something similar that she's doing in terms of run books. And that's kind of why we wanted to discuss this today, because it seems to be like a trend. Okay, so that's kind of the background on the issue, and I'm going to jump into the mural board. Can everyone see? Yes, okay. So let's see how we zoom. Okay. So from the Think Big issue, we have what's the problem that we want to solve. So there's a bunch of them. I kind of posted a few before the meeting, but if you have more ideas, feel free to jump in. So one of them is it's hard to find feature information that is related to the feature flag. And basically we already started, we added a new feature, I think it was in 13.1, where you can add context of feature flags to issues. So you can now know which issue is related to a feature flag. So you can know if it's toggled on or off, and if it's specific to the feature, and then later on you can see it in the release, which is really great information. And in the future, we want to add additional functionality like MRs. So what's the merge request that actually created this toggle, and epics and requirements, and maybe James one day in the future tests. So we want to have a lot of context around the feature flags. I even have an issue now that I'm working with the source code team to actually point it back to the code itself that connects to the feature flag. So the idea is, how can we utilize GitLab as a single source, as a single tool to get as much information as I can in my flag? Another thing that we have a problem with is that we don't have a way to filter and search feature flags. And we have a feature flag list, which is great, but once you have over an X amount of flags, it kind of becomes really, really hard to find. The flags are currently sorted by their create date or by numbers, and they don't actually have to be sequential. They can be on the instance level. So even if I created 2 flags, one after the other, if another customer did it, that it would have another number. So it's really hard to follow. It's hard to find. And imagine you have 100 flags in your project, and now you need to find a specific one. So it's hard. So we want to make it easy. Want to make it easy to filter based, let's say, on the labels that we discussed before, or by searching, or by sorting, or by other means of finding stuff quickly. There's no ability to collaborate or have discussions around feature flags. So again, feature flags can be a team effort. It can be used even from people outside the team. And maybe a feature flag that I created has an effect on another team. So it's really important to have a place that we can discuss and collaborate and bring ideas. If you even think about the concept of feature flags, the idea is to control the audience that gets a new feature. So if I want to now expose more users, I may need an approval or some kind of discussion, or maybe just give an FYI to people, hey, I'm increasing the exposure to 70% of the users now, just so people know. So it's really convenient to have the discussion area. We talked about assigning a feature flag, so I'm not going to repeat that. No ability to close feature flags. So today you can create feature flags, you can edit them, and you can delete them. But basically there's no history once you deleted them. So if we utilize something similar to close an issue, you can basically archive the flag and then always bring it back to life if needed, which is a really, really nice advantage. And labels we discussed. So that's kind of around the problems that we want to solve with this specific issue. Any questions or comments up until now?
I actually did have a question for you. You mentioned that you think the feature flag could be really comparable to an issue. As you kind of talked to customers and gathered information, is a feature flag an issue level entity? And so there's kind of one initiative and it may have many MRs? Or do you think there are organizations that may bring it up to an epic level where they have many issues that all tie into one feature and they need to use the feature flag to kind of release that one big feature? So would it be valuable to link multiple issues together, I guess is my question.
It kind of goes both ways. It really depends. Also, it depends how small a team is working. Usually people want flags to be on the smallest possible thing, but it could be also on an epic level. I don't think that the flag itself is an epic, but I may be wrong. It seemed to me like the use case was more issue. You could link an epic to a flag, but I haven't heard someone as saying like a flag would combine many issues. It's kind of hard to think about it because the terminology between our tool and others are different. So like in Atlassian, you have tasks, and that's kind of bounded by issues. That could be definitely in that level. But I think in the level of GitLab issues is the right form. And we do want to use this to also create like a first-class citizen experience for feature flags, because it's really, really kind of hard to find them today and use them. And there's a lot of missing data in them. Like even very basic data, like the create date and the creator of feature flags, that's something that we don't have, which we would get like for free if we created it as an issue type. Cool. So let's go ahead to the jobs to be done, unless there's more comments. Sorry. Okay. So jobs to be done. We have when working with feature flags, I want to be able to have full access to the feature information that is belonging to it to properly manage the feature flag. So this is all that data that we discussed previously. I can connect it to an issue. At the end of the day, when you have an issue, you already will know if there's a feature flag associated to it, and you get to see all the information on which environment is it enabled and what strategy is linked to it. Like even this is enabled for only 50% of the users. You get all that data just from looking from one place or from any place, which is, you know, what's really powerful about using GitLab, because you can see it from anywhere. So that's really, really important. It gives you a lot of power. And also, like, again, if we're thinking about the GitLab use case where we have SREs that are in charge of production that have nothing to do with the flags, it gives them full visibility of what team did this, what feature this is connected to, how many people are exposed to it, a lot of data. Next one is when working with feature flags, I want to be able to quickly find the one that I need in order to properly manage that. And then I kind of talked about that in the problem validation, in the problem section. And the next one is when working with feature flags, I want to be able to assign owners to it so that I can know who to contact in case of questions or assistance. This is mainly around when I need to revert something. So I have a flag on, something's going wrong in production and I want to turn it off. This is even more useful when we're talking about the next step of feature flags, which is A/B testing. And you're doing a bunch of many experimentations at any given time. And you want anyone in the team or even outside of the team to be able to turn on and off things that at least know who to notify or who to ask questions. And the next one is when working with feature flags, I want to be able to have a discussion with my team around it in order to manage collaboration around it. And that's what we talked about, the discussion area. And the personas that we're targeting at the moment is Sasha and Devon. I see someone wrote here, release manager, absolutely. And when we expand this to A/B testing, it's even more personas, which is really exciting because we're gonna bring a lot more personas into the release stage. So we're talking about UX designers, product managers, and a bunch more. I don't know, it's maybe a little bit premature to talk about A/B testing, but I think in terms of the ThinkBIG, it definitely is the place to talk about a bunch more personas who are less technical than the developers and the DevOps engineers that need the space to know what's going on with their production. It can even be support engineers. So customer support that enable or disable a feature for a specific customer is also super important. So more personas, which is really, really cool for us. Any questions?
Reed, have you talked about tying a feature flag or being able to trigger like A/B tests or rollbacks based on performance? I mean, so many times we talk about an A/B test in terms of business outcomes, but we run into, or I've run into in the past, cases where an A/B test, it gets turned off because of impact to customer experience, because like page loads are so much slower or backend processing is taking so much longer.
James, that's a great question. And the reason that's a great question is because I have an answer. Yes, absolutely. But I do want to differentiate. When we're talking about A/B testing for performance metrics, it's usually not those new personas that I mentioned. It's usually still the developers or the DevOps engineers. And we already have a feature that we're working on right now called post-deployment monitoring. And when you think about it, it's actually the same concept. Post-deployment monitoring kind of looks at alerts and incidents that come up post-deployment, and they let you know when something's going wrong. So it could be a bunch of 500s, it could be, you know, other stuff, and it could be based on an experiment. So we already have that mechanism in place, and yes, 100% is the same concept, just here usually the alerts or the incidents and the metrics that we're looking at are a little bit different. So yes. Any more questions? Wow, people are like bouncing around the mural. Oh, I see that there's a continuation to the mural. Let's go down to the blue part of the mural thing. So now it's your turn because I filled out all the top parts. So what can the ideal situation look like? And I see, James, you probably added this one, and yes, 100%. Oh, really? No? Okay. I don't know, things are jumping
Mural's
around.
just listening to us and starting to input its own cards.
Very, very good. Okay, so let's talk about the ideal solution. This is a kind of tricky one because we kind of started with the solution, which was let's make feature flags an issue type. But I'm open to suggestions for anything else, or like if you take a look at the issue that's linked on the top, there's not even a proposal. Like it's just a general idea. So I'm really, really interested to hear any thoughts on this.
I was kind of curious when you started talking about making an issue type that is specifically for feature flags. Does that mean, from kind of an experience perspective and thinking about that product manager persona, where there is a dedicated issue in the backlog that needs to be organized and that kind of feel to it? Or do you think that the feature flag kind of needs to live in its own section of the UI that's devoted entirely to just feature flags?
So I think it needs to be entirely different. And if you look now, when you create a new issue on GitLab, you have a type and you can choose issue incident. I imagine this to be like another type, which is feature flags. We can also discuss the name because experiments would also be under the same category. I wouldn't create two different ones. They're very similar. And Jackie, I also mentioned release run books as issue type. So there'll be a few here. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Audit, I dropped a link to a prototype, well, since we are almost solutionizing, for the release vision, and I created a prototype for the runbook issue type. Maybe will help others to visualize a little bit. Let me drop you in the chat.
Mind the number of tabs that I have open. This is just from today.
Yeah, if you zoom in this,
This one?
yeah, this one.
Okay, I need to figure out how to zoom in. Just one minute. What do I need to press, Hayana?
Oh, there's on top right, there's 33%. I think that's the zoom, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, so this is an experimentation with what a runbook issue type kind of thing would look like. And then this prototype, it will look like an issue, but then it's its own thing. Like what you were saying before, you select a type and then you have.
Yeah, so absolutely. What I'm missing here is the right panel where I still see the assignees and the labels and so on. But yes, this is the idea. And here you could still have your linked issues, epics, requirements, MRs, and flags, because some flags may be dependent on other flags. So that's what I'm imagining here. And here's your discussion section, as we mentioned. Yeah. Wow, this is super small. Okay. So let's write links to all other entity types.
When you're thinking about the full lifecycle management of a feature flag, will you ever reuse a feature flag or reopen it or?
Reopen, yes. That's what I mentioned, that one of the...
I'm sorry, I was late to this. I don't mean to rehash something that you've already talked about. I apologize.
That's fine. If once you close an issue, it becomes actually an archive flag, right? And then if you see that there's a need to revive it, you can. Whereas today you only delete a flag. So this is, yes, reopen. I do think the life cycle would be create, then assign someone, you know, it needs to actually be facilitated until it's ready. And then it's on. And then on, which I'm not sure how to translate that yet, but on is fluid because it can be on based on a strategy, it can be based on user IDs, or it can be based on percentage or others. So I don't know if there's a really good definition of what a done flag is, because done could be I reached 100%, or it could be I reached 50% because that was my intention. Feature flags are also a little bit tricky in the sense that there's a specific identifier for them, which is like a whole new issue, where there's temporary flags and there's permanent flags. So a temporary flag is, there's a feature, I'm experimenting with it, I want to see if it works well, and if it does, I'm going to slowly expose more users until I'm super happy with the result, and then I'm going to leave it on forever. Experiments, they're usually on for a finite amount of time, let's say 30 days, and then I'm going to select one to be a permanent behavior of the code based on performance or business metrics or whatever metric I wanted. And then there's permanent flags. So permanent flags is really interesting because people can decide to enable features to specific segments. Let's say I want to enable a feature for premium users. I can put that behind a feature flag for anyone that meets the criteria of premium. So those will never disappear. So there's it's a little bit different than issues in that sense of the life cycle. Some flags will never die.
Feature flag seems like a misnomer in that regard then, because that's more config. Like I've always thought about a feature flag as a temporary situation, like in the context of how we talk about feature flags at GitLab as part of our development process and more broadly. I've talked about configuration being more of a permanent thing. If this feature is configured to go to this license type or to mobile experience or just Windows users, but not as a feature flag. Feature flags I've always thought about as more temporary in nature. And so they kind of have that, you have an end date for it. You have a goal to learn something from the feature flag, and then you make that permanent. So I'm having, my brain is freaking out trying to think about permanent feature flags. Sorry, you broke me already, Arit.
That's a very interesting perspective. I have a very different experience with feature flags, where we've always had them instrumented as a part of our software. And once we've added more features, like incrementally, we may have needed to completely turn off that node, for example. So it would always live in perpetuity, and sometimes we would remove them, like if we found that this was a stable feature set, or we're done incrementally rolling out to that server, or whatever.
I think about a feature flag as like you all of a sudden create all of these potential divergent paths within your application, especially like when you're talking about B2C. And now like you could have 1,000 user paths, so there's no way to test all of them as you're doing regression testing or something like that. So you could find and create really funky experiences when you introduce a new flag upstream, or a new A/B test is really what I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden this path that has been rock solid before breaks all over the place because it's not configuration and there's not just one path through there.
Yeah, so one of the strengths of feature flag is exactly that. When you talk about a flag in configuration, it could be like a Kubernetes object or whatever, you need to redeploy everything once you change the configuration. And feature flags you can change in runtime. So that's why people, I don't know if people, not everyone knows about this concept, but people prefer it because of that. It doesn't require you to rebuild everything. And you can change the rules on the fly. So that's really awesome. And a really, really nice benefit of feature flags is that you can base your new rules based on your application. Because when you do configuration, it's very static. When you do traffic controlled feature rollout, it's based on some network rules. It could be geolocation, it can be, subnets or domains or whatever. But here you can base it on your logic of your application. So for example, if you're creating this really cool application for playlists of songs, and you decide that you want to give premium users as anyone who has more than 100 songs on their playlist, you can make that rule because it's based on your application. So people just love it because of that. What do we say? Can we move on to the yellow, or do we want to stay here on the ideal solution?
Yellow.
Yellow, yeah.
Yellow.
And just to mention that we did not discuss on the ideal solution anything about dashboards, because I think that's a whole different topic. But yes, managing feature flags is like a whole new complexity. And another ThinkBIG section. So that's just like a teaser. So let's go to the yellow. Okay, so how do we differentiate with competition? And that's a great question. And this is following a conversation that I had with Jackie. Feature flags, there's like a bunch of companies, that's all they do. GitLab is just part of a small group that does feature flags. So differentiating is difficult, but where can we differentiate? So I think anything that utilizes our GitLab as a single tool will give us differentiation. So all that context that I mentioned between issues and epics and MRs and so on and so forth, that's a differentiator. Another differentiator is still in the realm of context. Contextual connection to source code is super powerful. So Launch Darkly has a feature that you get snippets of the code. Launch Darkly is built on top of, it's integrated with other tools like Microsoft TFS or with Atlassian Jira. And they bring you the snippet of the code. So you can see, like, if there's a flag A, you see this is the snippet of the code that turned on the flag, but it's not managed by Launch Darkly. So we as GitLab, since we already hold the source code, we can show the context to the code. I was thinking in a manner like you can see the code diffs on MR, so you can see the entire section. You can like change it directly from there. You can do remarks, suggestions, whatever, code reviews directly through there and get really good compatibility and context from the feature flag. So that's, I think, a really, really good differentiator. Another differentiator that we have, which is not so much about implementation or problem validation, but something really interesting that I heard from customers. So I was brought in on a call on a customer call from a large enterprise, a bank, that are migrating from another tool to GitLab, and they're buying GitLab Ultimate. And one of the things they were really excited about was that they saw that our feature flag, that we have feature flags inside that offering. And when I talked to them, they're using Launch Darkly, which is an awesome tool. It's really, really great tool, but they charge per API request. And they have 1 million users, this specific customer. So think about it, if you get charged per API request and you have 1 million users using it on a daily basis, that just translates to a lot of bucks. So if we make this compatible enough for customers to think about transitioning to GitLab feature flags, we can save them a bunch of money, but while still bringing ultimate capabilities into feature flags. So I think that's another differentiation. We don't charge per API request. James, if you have ideas about connection to test coverage or others. Did we lose James?
I think James actually had to drop off, yeah. I did just want to bring up that I have heard this story so many times that the biggest value we can add, even if we don't have all the robust features, is the tight integration we have with the rest of the DevOps lifecycle. So I always feel like that's, whenever there's a new idea and we want to talk about that competitive differentiator, that's the area I always like to focus on. It's like how, since we already have all the other stuff, how can we make that transparent, even if it is just a moment in that feature flag issue that's like, click on this to go see the code or see the MR that started all of this or whatever it is. Customers love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, go ahead.
I think this also brings in predictability in our process, which would be very difficult if we are using a third-party tool.
Yes, absolutely. They do that with different integrations, but I think that we can have like really natural flow that would give a really nice user experience to customers. Another like nice, cool feature, I don't know if this would be a differentiator, but it's a nice feature, is the ability to toggle flags by quick actions or markdown. So in the MR, you just do / toggle, and you have the flag toggles, which is cute. Another thing that's really nice is what we discussed with James about post-deployment. So once we connect feature flags with deployments, we can connect performance and business metrics now to any deployment. And when you want to try something that's going wrong, you can even add different annotations to figure out that this is a time where a flag was turned on, and you can see if there was some kind of degradation, and you can get a lot of insights just from connecting all this stuff together. We actually have a community contribution coming in this next milestone that triggers a webhook whenever a feature flag is toggled. So that just opens up a ton more capabilities where you can trigger pipelines and jobs and other things based on this webhook.
This has been such a cool conversation. Is there any other competitive differentiators that come to mind?
I was just thinking, or does it also enable us to do some sort of integration with our pipeline visualization? So like to understand where things are breaking, one could quickly go and have a look at the visualization and understand, get a glimpse of a superficial idea about what has been going wrong instead of going to the logs.
Possibly. The only thing that I'm a little bit hesitant to say yes is because the pipelines are usually building the deployment out, and it's not post. And this usually happens after something is deployed. So feature flags usually change after. So I think it gives us a lot of insight, not so much on the pipeline visualization, but yes, in terms of metrics that we collect, incidents, alerts. If you turn the flag on and then all of a sudden you have this spike in the number of 500 that you're getting, and then you go and drill down and you see that this started when a feature flag turned on, then you know the root cause. It's really easy to turn it off. Anyone can turn it off. So that's really great.
One opportunity for differentiation I also see is remediation with feature flags. So like if there's ways to automate, kind of going back to our previous conversation, rollbacks, but also building quick commands inside of our run books. So if you have a quick command turning on and enabling a feature flag, building in those scripts from your run book so that if a user has a threshold met within their monitoring, they just turn on that feature flag and then it's all gravy. And by all gravy, I mean like the production instance is safe and we're good, to be super clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hayana, let's add this to Flow B.
I had to drop off. Sorry about that.
I'll add that to the issue. Add to Flow B.
Yeah. So I think that's really, really awesome. I don't know, like larger issues, I kind of feel like this has just become a feature flag conversation, but I'm going to go with it. Not specifically to this feature flag issue type, but we have like a lot of ideas of how to utilize make review apps feature flags. Okay, so that's like a really nice idea to think about the fact that you can develop something on the specific branch, have it exposed to certain customers, and then decide if this is good, and you can merge it to master and then expose to more. So that's really an interesting concept to explore. It's not in the scope of this issue, but it's still interesting. And a differentiator.
All right. This is so cool. The next part of our conversation is the think small aspect. So we had quite a bit of conversation around how awesome feature flags are and how much they do way more than I thought they did. So when thinking about creating this issue type that has the archive of information and a single source of truth with labels and authors and owners and stuff like that, what is the classic GitLab question of what's the smallest change that we could make to start moving towards these ideas?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it in this forum, because I know that we're all, well, not all, but some of us are working towards create this new issue type. So I think we need to figure out the first steps anyway, regardless of what the issue type is. I assume the easiest way to approach this would be to just copy the full issue as it is today and just call it a feature flag, and then start like removing unneeded sections before adding specific ones.
And that is the paradigm that Monitor has implemented with Incident. So if we go down that path, it's a pretty nice iteration path. It's easily chunked into multiple milestones already following that paradigm. There might be some other lighter weight instrumentation that we could also discover as well when it comes to how do we think about settings inside of feature flags to make it easier to configure and set up feature flags for users so that their experience is more inside their existing flow. If we think about all the personas and the entry points for feature flags, it's something really broad. You know, like we could be thinking about an operations team member, a release manager, a developer. So we need to consider settings not being locked behind a maintainer permission set, but then also allowing potentially organizations to configure elevated permissions for certain environments behind that lock and key. So making sure that we have these tiers of configuration is important. But I think from a think small perspective, that's been paved pretty well from an issue type view.
So the question is, and I don't know this technical answer, is how composable are the issue types? Like, is it easier to copy everything and then start removing, or is it easier to like just take the discussions part and stick it on a feature flag? So that's the big question. Like just slowly compose the feature flag. The bonus that this way has, and the con that the copy everything is that if someone starts using it and then we decide it's not needed and it needs to go to the trash, they lose their data.
Oops. I think unfortunately, this is so solution specific right now that it makes it kind of hard to think small on it, Ian, because we already have like a good example of how to iterate from Monitor with creating an issue type. So maybe we could explore if there's another opportunity to create feature flag workflows. Is that like what another exercise that we could do?
Yeah, I am definitely down for that.
So if we were to look at a different entry point, James, going back to your A/B testing perspective, how do you foresee feature flags playing into your workflows? And how could we introduce feature flags into a micro experience today?
I think we lost James.
Oh, geez, dang, he was the only other person that was engaged.
Yeah, we have Ritika. Ritika also.
Oh, there you go. Hi, Vitika. What do you think? Is there a micro experience that you feel like feature flags would be particularly useful to hook into for testing today?
I'm not so sure. I was looking at the strategies and guidelines. I was looking at the strategies and guidelines associated with feature flags as of today, and they look super complex to follow. So I think if this issue type kind of condenses them and simplifies that, that would be a big plus.
Okay, let's walk you through an experiment. Let's say you're thinking about designing a whole new issue type called feature flag, and you want to create an A/B test to see which one is easier for the users to see. And now you have like a few designs, and you want them exposed to different audiences. How would you go about that?
From a recent experience, I think I was subjected to an A/B testing somewhere. And because I was so stuck in the new flow, I felt very frustrated, but there was a link handy to quickly go back to the old one. But I'm not very sure how effective that is, because every new experience is kind of jarring for users momentarily. So providing an easy trigger to switch back wouldn't be a very ideal solution. I'm just thinking out loud.
Okay, so let me take you through another workflow. You're doing pipeline visualization, and you have a few ideas of what this should look like for the users. Now you need to create an issue to describe this, and you have like 3 or 4 different variants of mockups that you want to try out. How would you open that up? How would you open that up as, I don't want to say an issue because I don't want to lead you into the answer, but now you have 4 things and you need to start rolling them out. What would you do?
Okay. Thinking that might be the solution in near future. I mean, that might be a situation for near future for us, but yeah, how would that be done? So let's say if I talk about DAG visualization, what we are doing is there was one MVC that was rolled out, but we are bringing in the same capabilities to our static visualization as well. And what's happening is our static visualization, along with telling the dependencies to the users between jobs, it's going to also communicate to them all the other kinds of information which the other dedicated visualization would not. And how would we present both of them to users? Can someone please help me out here?
How would you target the users like at the different mockups?
How would I target? Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't get a question, or could you repeat once?
Yeah. So you have 2 different mockups. How do you decide who gets what? Does it matter if if it's arbitrary, then you just say 50% get this and 50% get this. If it's important to you, like let's say based on persona, then you give a specific persona, a specific mockup. Like how would you target it?
Okay, so this particular visualization, it makes sense only if you are using the keyword needs. So organizations, or let's say users who are using that keyword very frequently and are dealing with a pipeline which is heavy on dependencies, it would be very useful to present it to them first, like to attend to them first. And then if it works out, if the feedback is good, then rolling it out as a regular feature like that everybody could access.
How would you get the feedback, and what do you mean by feedback is good?
By feedback, I mean kind of solution validation. I don't know how in any other way we do it here in GitLab, but solution validation is a good way.
Okay.
So are you talking about getting that kind of validation from actual users in the product, and in that they didn't know necessarily that they're in a test and we're just testing with like a quantified number of users?
That could be. I'm still kind of stuck on the think small and what's the first iteration in VC. And
because
so what I'm trying to figure out is what is the minimum data that we need to have inside the issue type in order to start from that.
You know, it's interesting that you're thinking that way, because I feel like if you just clone issue type, then you're getting everything. And
well, yes,
then you need to like narrow down what you need.
Yes, Jackie, but I still need my specific feature flag things there. So I need to have some way to still add the strategies and environments in there. So it's a little complex. And also, what I'm scared about, and maybe this is just me being cautious, is that people start using something that I decide to remove in like 2 milestones. And I don't know, maybe we can get away with it by saying it's an alpha or something like that. But that's what I'm a little bit hesitant about. I mean, like there's some things and issues that make no sense to have as a feature flag in my mind.
Yeah, so here's how I would approach it. I would do all of these iterations behind a feature flag and only make it available on the front end once I have the actual issue type that's attached to feature flag strategies, that has the ability to attach it to an environment. Because like your job to be done for a feature flag is specific to an environment. So an issue type is not specific to an environment. So in order for a user to be able to turn off and on a feature flag for an environment, they would need to be able to do that first. So if we approach it from like a job to be done perspective, I think that the MVC for this can be not usable and have all the stuff for an issue type, and you don't have to ship that to production in a viewable state. But in 3 milestones, you can ship the viewable state in production, and that can be your final delivery. As a thought.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's another idea that I just had, that how about tying in some telemetry tools to this so that we are able to trace the action flow. I mean, we can follow the clicks, like what's the, if they are entering a feature, are they staying there and accomplishing what they have to, and then just going away to perform the other tasks, or are they switching the views to find an alternate, and what they need is not provided in the new feature?
I'm not sure I fully followed the comment.
So I briefly used this telemetry tool, which allowed me to track the actions that users are performing on a particular product. And it let me understand like what was the flow of their actions, as in if they are entering from this particular page, which page are they navigating to? Are they going back and forth? Are they staying there for some time? Or are they quickly looking for some alternative? Are they feeling lost? Or are they just leaving it there?
Yeah, so absolutely. That connects again to A/B testing. And an A/B test has to be connected to some kind of metric system. We're thinking about starting with Snowplow because we can use it internally in GitLab. And then based on the results of whatever the metrics are, that's the result of the experiment. And that's when you know like what variant to choose. So if we're talking about, let's say, 2 different mockups that we have for some feature, let's just use pipeline visualization for the example, and you just roll it out to 50% of the users, and you see that one of them has just so much more engagement on it because there's more people clicking or more people, I don't know, completing the stage or whatever, then that's the one you choose. So in the concept is you define the experiment, you define the experiment duration, you need to define the success criteria, and then at the end of the experiment, you have all the data and you decide which one to get rid of and which one to leave in the product.
So we would be using something of that sort for this?
Well, not specifically this issue of the issue type, but yes, in the future, A/B testing.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we are at time, at GitLab time, that 10 minutes fast. Does anybody have any final thoughts of quick iterations or ways that we could kick this off the ground? I did want to call out, it would be kind of interesting, similar to Jackie's idea of kind of building your feature flag idea behind a feature flag, and then experimenting internally. So the cost of giving a feature that you end up not wanting to use is a little bit lower. And then you can experiment, get the data without taking features away from users, just as a thought I wanted to share. But does anybody else have anything to add? All right. Well, thank you all very much for another great Think Big, and thank you, Orit, for presenting and sharing that awesome idea.
Thanks.